Miracles. Yes.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Dan.
Sorry it took us so long to get everything set up, but we wanted to make sure that we could get some audio and possibly some video. We're just trying that out. Hopefully it'll work out. I'm not entirely positive. I'll be your screen for today. Want to welcome you all. Thanks for coming out to Atheists of Utah monthly brunch. We're delighted to have Dr. Gregory Clark with us today. I would imagine that most of you are familiar with Dr. Clark. If not, you're in for a real treat today. He's a great speaker. Very much a firebrand atheist.
Yes.
Very, very smart guy. He'll be presenting miracles, morals, and medicine. Why God won't heal amputees, but maybe people can. I will turn the time over to him now, and I hope you guys have a good time.
Can we turn the lights down?
Oh, yes. Thank you very much. I will go and ask them to all that.
Let there be no light.
Yeah.
And the music, yes. I'll go and do that.
Fire one of those.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Tracy, for inviting me. Thank you all for coming. It's great to have these brunches. I hope to come myself more. I did come a couple of months ago when Mike was speaking during his run for governor, and it was great. So I'm going to get started. The topic I'll be talking about today, as Dan indicated, is miracles or nonsense, morals, and why religion doesn't have them, and actually, ironically, science does, and medicine, and how it is that medicine and science actually are directly conflicting with religion despite attempts of accommodationists to say how they're compatible. They aren't. And in particular, I'll focus on this issue of why God won't heal amputees, which was made famous by Marshall Brain, but is very pertinent to my own work, because that is, in fact, sort of what we're trying to do. Although, fairly put, it's not so much trying to heal them, that's a long-term goal, as to at least provide them with advantageous advanced neuroprostheses. So, I often start off these talks by thinking about what science is. Today I'm going to start it off by thinking about what religion is. And of course I ask the gods being Google, what is religion, right? And the Google gods said religion is the opiate of the masses, of course, no surprise there, is all bunk. It's a smile on a dog. Okay, I'm not sure about that one. It's a lie, it's a fake, it's dying, it's mental illness, it's the root of all evil, it's poison. Religion is bad. I did not bias Google. This is hope for the human race in a very real way. I mean, this is no longer what Google search does is really sort of count what people are doing, and this is what people are saying. That's wonderful. I'm going to make the claim that religion is, number one, ridiculous, that number two, it's repulsive, and number three, it's deeply dishonest. Okay? It's no surprise to anyone here that religion is ridiculous, right? We start off with the Bible. The very first sentence is wrong by about 10 billion years, right? God created the heaven and earth. No. The heavens were there, universe was there about 10 billion years before the earth was. And it goes downhill from there, right? Day 3, we got fruit trees growing on earth. Day 4, the sun and stars appear. I mean, come on now. It's bad enough that plants won't grow fruit without sunshine, but even worse still is this betrays the deep ignorance of these goat herders at the time. We now know that the very atoms that make up the earth, the carbon atoms that make up the trees, these were forged in the nuclear furnaces of the stars, which according to the Bible didn't even exist. This is ridiculous. Move on to Genesis 2. This omniscient, omnipotent being creates Adam, and then he brings Adam sheep and cattle and beasts of the field in order to find him a fuck buddy. And he couldn't find a helpmeet, right? So then he invents Eve. Well, aside from the absurdity, right, Genesis 2 directly contradicts Genesis 1. Game over. The Bible is nonsense. There's not a single sentence in there that couldn't have been written by the ignorant peoples of long ago, because it was written by the ignorant people of long ago, right? It's repulsive. But let's pause there. We often get the claim that, science can't decide what ought to be. And that we get the questions that can someone be good without God? The real truth is it's just the opposite. Is can someone be good with God? Religion is repulsive. And I mean this in a very deep way. I don't mean it simply because the scriptures say, for example, that you should kill all practicing gays, or that God drowned every baby on earth and this is supposed to be a good thing, or that he slaughtered the Egyptian firstborns to show off that he was the biggest, baddest, most terrorist-inducing God of all, right? Because moderates can dismiss that part as fancy with their cherry picking. No, it's deeper than that. Even religion at its best, or at least Christianity at its best, not at its worst, at its best, is inherently repulsive. And I'm going to talk about that. It's also deeply dishonest, right? Religion is sanctification of lying to oneself, right? It's obvious that religion is ridiculous. It's obvious that it's repulsive. And it is really the moderates who, if anything, are more hypocritical and more dishonest than anybody at all. The funnies at least, own up to their bullshit. And the moderates want to sprinkle it with sprinkles and think it tastes better. No, right? One miracle is as absurd as another. And the basic problem is not whether it's this miracle or that miracle, but claiming the supernatural at all. So let's think a little bit about science. Science isn't simply a collection of facts and achievements, right? Instead, it's a method. It's a method we use to discover natural facts about the universe. And that's deeply important because it's that methodology, not just the achievements, not just past facts, that make all the difference. It's what allows science to progress. It's the very opposite of what religion does. So when we question the method, when we throw away that method for magical thinking, we are inherently dissing science and throwing it out the window. And whether that's for anti-vax or GMOs or climate warming or anything else is somewhat of a secondary issue. The real issue is, do we appeal to magic or do we appeal to empirical realities? Right? And sometimes people complain that, I'm harsh on religion. But this is a good reason to be harsh on religion. Right? As an instructor, I'm often told that I should engage people in lifelong learning. Well, yeah, I agree with that, right? And the most important thing of all is not teaching people what to think, but teaching people how to think. And that really illustrates the pernicious nature of religion. It teaches people to doubt their doubts before they doubt their faith, right? That's just wrong. What we should be doing is questioning everything, trying to challenge it, trying to disprove it if we can, and if we can't, that's the best that we have for now. It's not a matter of faith, it's a matter of evidence and analysis. So enough of this, why do I care what people think, right? I care what people think because thinking is the most important thing that we do, or certainly one of the most important things we do. It's the basis of learning, it's the basis of cultural progress from one generation to another, and it's what allows us to advance. All right, so it was a particular disappointment to me that I went yesterday to the March for Science wearing this t-shirt. Sorry, it's a little funky, but wearing the t-shirt, going up the hill, thinking we're going to be hearing about promoting science, not only as a bunch of facts, but as an alternative to magical thinking. And I was greatly disappointed. All right, there were some speakers that spoke to that a little bit. Mario Capecchi was there. His talk was traditional, but fine. But then comes up Brigham Daniels, professor of law at BYU. Yeah, now look, right? Religious people can be good people despite their religion, right? Not necessarily because of it, right? People are complex, people compartmentalize, people are a mess of contradictions. I get that, right? And even religious people can be good scientists. But they have to throw away their science in order to do it. I mean, their religion in order to do it, right? But he gets up there and he says, my wife had cancer. And I was praying with desperation, and God answered my prayers. God answered my prayers. This is a march for science, not a march for magical thinking, right? So this is not only ridiculous, it's repulsive, right? Think about what this means, right? It means that his God was holding his wife's health hostage until he would pray. What kind of shit stain would do that? God, that's it. It means that God intervened to get his wife a good medical team, but all those other cancer patients who died, nah. He could have intervened, but didn't want to. This is not only ridiculous, it's repulsive, and it goes against the very nature of science, right? He then goes on to say, as a person of faith, I'm embarrassed that others would use their faith to deny empirical findings of science. And my head exploded, right? So if I got brains falling out here, don't blame me. Right? I mean, he's just there saying, okay, I prayed and a magical deity intervened to save my wife. Excuse me. That flies in the face of empirical evidence. Intercessory prayer does nothing. Absolutely nothing. Right? Number two, I mean, I presume as a professor at BYU, he's a Mormon.
Yeah.
Okay, like the Book of Mormon absolutely flies in the face of empirical evidence. Right? And Mormonism depends on it being not only metaphorically true, but physically, historically true. Right? And this is an example of the hypocrisy that permeates religion or the religious. Example of the audacious dishonesty that undermines any attempt to take them seriously. So then he goes on, he says, I want to talk about a perceived conflict of science and religion. For me, the perceived conflict comes from trying to place faith in science. Oh my God, science is just another form of faith. Oh, please, give me a break, right? Of trying to fit in a box that's according to our understanding and not according to the reality of God's goodness and greatness. Right? And I'm up there shouting, going, facts, not faith, facts, not faith. So, are they compatible? No. Right? Any questions? I mean, it's self-evident, right? We can either propose natural or supernatural explanations about the universe. We can't have it both ways. Jerry Coyne said, in religion, faith's a virtue. In science, it's a sin. We don't take things for granted. We try to knock down our ideas. These two approaches to understanding our world are inherently incompatible. Right? Religion is the ultimate in alternative facts that have no basis in reality whatsoever. So what is a scientist? A scientist is someone who questions and who tries to find out what is real and what is make-believe. And I love this quote from Isidore Rabbi, a Nobel Prize-winning physicist, and an answer that will warm the hearts of parents everywhere. He was asked, why did you become a scientist? And he said, my mother. My mother made me a scientist without ever intending it. Every other Jewish mom in Brooklyn would ask her child after school, so did you learn everything today? Right? This is science as a collection of facts, but not my mother. She always asked me a different question. Izzy, she would say, did you ask a good question today? That difference, asking good questions, made me become a scientist. Right? Doubt everything, question everything, do the best you can to distinguish between reality and make-believe, and be open to new interpretations. But at some point, it becomes true beyond any reasonable doubt, and stop pretending otherwise. All right, that was bad enough. All right? But then the MC of the entire thing gets up, and this is a small rant on my part. This is just an offhand comment. But she had spent a lot of time in this march promoting the diversity of science, promoting the inclusivity of science. And rightly so. We need more women. We need more people of color, right? We're wasting a lot of human potential when these candidates are not part of the process. So she spent a lot of time on that, right? And then after Daniels gets up and she goes, no matter what faith you are, all faiths, we're supported by the same planet. All right? So what's key there is the omission. Right? After having gone to great lengths to include everybody else in terms of gender, in terms of race, in terms of other forms of diversity, when it came to religion, it was no mention whatsoever of people of no faith, unlike Obama, to his credit, mentioned. Right? So helpful hint, March for Science. Members of the National Academy of Science, over 90% of them are atheist and agnostic. maybe, just maybe, these are people worth thinking about and including in your statements if you want to talk about promoting science, right? These are the people who actually do believe in empirical evidence, who do believe in science, who do not believe or promote magical thinking, unlike the March of Science was doing. All right, that's example one. Let me move on to example number two, which is a relatively recent op-ed in which I finally blew my cap yet again. This is a common process for me, happens no more than 7 times a day, regarding Mother Teresa. So there was a whole string of articles, like news articles, promoting Mother Teresa, and finally I had enough of it, so I shot off another op-ed regarding Mother Teresa and the delusion of religion. And this really was more about the delusion of religion per se than just about Mother Teresa, who is just a concrete example, because you got to put concrete examples on stuff, because otherwise people say it's just a straw man. Well, this isn't a straw man. This is a straw woman, maybe, but it's not even that. It's a real person that is honored and revered by millions throughout the world. Right? This is not an example of extremism. And there's a little quote down here, which those of you sitting there can't read, so I'll read it for you. Right? Many of the Vatican would agree that she's a living saint. Well, I would challenge that, but that's not really the point of my op-ed. But the Catholic Church, nevertheless, has a grueling process, really grueling, to make it official, right? Involving volumes of historical research, the hunt for miracles, and teams of experts to weigh the evidence. This is nonsense. They did nothing of the sort. This was a huge PR move to get the faithful to kick in yet more dollars, right? So this is the faith healing of Mother Teresa. Mother Monica Barisa was one of her purported miracles. She was cured of a cancerous tumor, purportedly, by a beam of light that was emitted from Mother Teresa's picture in a medallion placed on her abdomen. Right? Likewise, a Brazilian man recovered after a prayer to Mother Teresa, right? So, this really does provide a concrete example of how ridiculous religion is, right? If I said to anyone here that if I took a picture of, Oprah Winfrey and put it on someone's chest and that cured cancer, I would rightly be called a quack, right? And yet when you say exactly the same thing about Mother Teresa, then the world goes wild with praise, and thousands fill the Vatican Square in her honor, right? This is quackery of the worst sort. It's repulsive and deeply dishonest, right? So not only is this quackery, it's self-evident quackery, and this point is made very well by Marshall Brain, though it was made by Carl Sagan before him. It was really popularized by Marshall Brain, right? So, right, when does prayer work? When does intercessory prayer work? The simple answer is never. Why? Why doesn't God answer prayers?
He don't exist.
For the same reason Superman doesn't stop crime, is he's imaginary. This is self-evident, right? And it's self-evident if you do careful analysis of something like cancer rates, right? If anything, people who went to Lourdes had a worse recovery rate than those who did, maybe because their expectations were too high. But if you take any example, and this is just one, if you take any example where there would not be spontaneous recovery, there is no recovery, right? And one way you can frame this is in terms of what the Bible actually says. Therefore I say unto you, what things prayer you desire when ye pray, believe that ye shall receive them, and ye shall have them. Okay? That's nonsense. It's flat out wrong. Right? And moderate Christians would kind of laugh at this too, right? Francis Collins, a distinguished scientist, head of the Human Genome Project, presently head of NIH, is an evangelical Christian, which also makes my head explode, right? So he would reject this claim. But what every Christian believes is that God has the power to do that. Otherwise, he's not the Christian God, right? He's not the Christian God. So I had the pleasure of meeting Marshall Brain at the American Atheist Convention back in 2015. He has a several wonderful websites. One is called Why Won't God Heal Amputees, which used to be called Why Does God Hate Amputees, but he toned it down. He has another one, God is Imaginary, and he has a book out also called How God Works. For those of you who don't know, Marshall Brain is the author of How Blank Works series, or How Stuff Works series. And the pretty obvious answer is, how does God work? Not at all, right? But because he's a popular science writer, he has a wonderful way of explaining what sometimes get to be arcane arguments in very straightforward prose. So if you're not familiar with his work, I highly recommend it. Not so much for its novelty as for its clarity. All right, so it's ridiculous. It's repulsive. And, as already said, let's consider this example. God knows little Sally is dying painfully of cancer, like one of the people that Mother Teresa supposedly healed. God could save her, but he won't because you have to ask him first. This is what intercessory prayer means, right? What kind of person or shit stain would willfully hold the life of a child hostage to make you beg? The Christian God, according to Christianity, right? This is not the things that moderates would dismiss as being silly. This is the very essence of intercessory prayer. What kind of narcissist would believe that the omnipotent God of all-powerful creator of the universe would be waiting for you to ask him to do something, right? Anybody who believes in intercessory prayer. That's who. This is ridiculous. And it is repugnant, right? But, going back to the Mother Teresa thing, right? This isn't just some wacky, arcane statement about a few religious extremists. This is the essence of all of Christianity. This is what essentially every Christian believes. And I'm familiar with the no true Scotsman argument. But if you throw out this part of what God is, the Christian God is, you throw out Christianity, right? This is not an exaggeration. God is omniscient, he's omnipotent, and he's omnibenevolent, right? That is the definition of the Christian God. So what does that mean? It means if you're omnipotent, you're able to heal every amputee, but he refuses to heal a single one. This is self-evident. Right? And the excuses you get for why he won't do it are just legion and astonishing, right? It's not only amputees, right, that he's refusing to heal, that if God is omnibenevolent, it's also the right thing for him to do, to refuse to help. This is astonishing. And of course, that's just one example. Likewise, willfully letting other people die from cancer, Brigham Daniel's wife, great, God intervenes. All those people that died, he didn't, but that's the right thing to do. And the example that I used in the article, which was deliberately provocative but quite accurate, was willfully refusing to stop altar boys from being raped has got something that God did deliberately, and if you believe in Christianity, was the right thing for him to do. Okay? Well, this did indeed create a bit of a shitstorm. This isn't the 10 million views that you get on YouTube, but for a hard copy newspaper, it's actually quite astonishing to get over 5,000 comments. The Trib published 5 op-eds or letters to the editor in response. 4.5 of them were rebuttals. Joe Andrade, who actually was a colleague of mine, was at least partially conceptually correct, but had the usual whine of lamenting about my ill-chosen words. It was like too disrespectful. Forget it. It doesn't deserve respect, right? So here's just an example of one op-ed by Peter Caroon. Everybody know who he is?
Yeah.
Right? He's the current chair of the Democratic Convention, State Democratic Convention. Right? He was former mayor of Salt Lake County. This is not a dumb man, right? But his response was just one more egregious example of political word weaseling and scuzzbag avoiding the issues, right? So one of his arguments was something I hadn't addressed. If we only had more St. Teresas, the world would be a better place to live and full of miracles in our humanity. Okay, well, there was a clause in my op-ed that made reference to this. But, if you really want to take down a Mother Teresa, read Chatterjee's book or Hitchens' book. She was not a good person, right? She was a person who stole money intended for the poor to give to her church. She was a person who promoted suffering. She was a person who used suffering to extract conversions on people's deathbeds. She's a person who fought against the only means of reducing poverty for women in the third world, or at least the most effective means, which is to give them reproductive rights. These are not good things. But that's not even what my article was about. It was about the very concept of this magical thinking and how ridiculous and repulsive it was. And so Karun takes that and he goes, well, I'm not going to speak to the miracle, the thing that was actually the center point of your op-ed. The real miracle may have been not in the cures, but in the ability to give her whole self to others and to find worth in others. I'm sorry, that's not a miracle. That is not a miracle. That is not what the Pope was preaching. That is not what the Catholic Church was preaching, to fill up their coffers. Right? And then he goes on, those of us who are members of churches recognize that humans run our church as a standard complaint, right? With all their faults and failures. Religion is perfect. God is perfect. We're imperfect vessels to complete his will. That's nonsense. That wasn't the point of the op-ed, right? The point of the op-ed was that God himself could have intervened to have cured any other cancer victim. God himself could have intervened to prevent the altar boys from being raped. Instead, he stood back and watched and did nothing. You don't get to blame that on the priests. You get to blame that on God, right? So reality check, Arun. It ain't just flawed humans. It's a fundamental flaw of your religion. Your God, according to you, is omniscient, omnipotent, and omnibenevolent. That's what you preach. That's what you preach. I'm just repeating back what you say. Accordingly, your God could have stopped altar boys from being raped, but overall, he didn't want to. Willfully letting them be raped was the right thing for him to do. That's what you preach, Karun. That's what you preach, every Catholic. That's what you preach, every Christian who has any right to use the word Christian. Right? So don't blame me. I'm just repeating back what your religion says. And anybody who says that I should be respectful, let me counter with this, right? The reason that they got upset was because I pointed out to them the obvious, what they're preaching, right? And all this respectful language about, let's respect all faiths, we're all in this together, is what didn't sink through. Right? You got to tell it what it is. They're too used to this veneer of false civility. All right. Well, that was one example. But another one that really hit the fan was the Catholic League and Bill Donahue. So, the day after I published this, he came out with this. Professor Clark is not your ordinary egghead. In one short article, he manages to malign God, Christianity, Pope Francis, and Mother Teresa. Well, actually, I think that's pretty good. Thanks, Bill. So, love, not your ordinary egghead. And then he goes on to various ad hominems. Best of all are his qualifications to assess Catholicism. I wrote a scientific paper. And then he puts my email down at the bottom. Okay? Now, he's not really doxing me because anybody who takes the effort can find my email, right? It's a professional email. You go to the bioengineering website and you'll find it just fine. But this led to thousands, certainly hundreds of emails flooding my professional inbox with a range of comments, almost all of them derogatory, attacking, fuck you, spawn of Satan kind of stuff. Not one person, no, that's not quite true. To almost the complete majority, actually even did one person, like Bill's own response, not one actually tried to address the issues. They all blame me for not understanding Christianity. Right? And so I go to them, well, wait a minute. Okay, explain it to me. Is God omniscient? Is God omnipotent? Is God omnibenevolent? What did I get wrong? Right? And not one of them had a legitimate response. Right? There were an occasional, actually really quite endearing emails about people who admitted they were struggling with this. I had a particularly interesting email from someone who worked with Mother Teresa and pretty much repeated firsthand in her own personal down in the trenches way of what the operation was really all about. And trust me, it was not about helping the poor. It was about filling the coffers of the Catholic Church. All right, so that wasn't bad enough. But he, the Catholic League, also emailed, not just invited everybody to email me, they emailed his diatribe against me to everybody in my department. Wow. Okay? And I presume my chair, and I presume my dean, and who knows, the president of the university. And to their credit, they didn't give me any flack about it whatsoever. Right? But this is what people do. So when I get in flame wars on Facebook and people go, can't you take it? And I go, frankly, at least I still got my job, no matter what you say, right? This is what I have to deal with. A couple of nice things came out of it. The Friendly Atheist posted a nice article. My op-ed actually rose to number 1 on our atheism. I read it, with some nice comments. And I pause here not to pat myself on the back, but to point out what's really important about speaking out. Now, there's a lot of things that are important about speaking out, but know this, right? The real difference in social conformity is not the difference between 0 and 1. That's a hard battle. But if there's 2 people, just 2 people, that stand up and say something, that extra person gives a lot of confidence to the first. And this has been studied in social psychology, where they set up confederates and wacky things. And if you're the only one that is seeing smoke coming out the vent, or the only one who thinks that the line isn't straight, you ultimately give in to peer pressure. It's very, very hard to fight. But if there's one other person, just one, who's willing to say the same thing, it makes all the difference in the world in an empirical way. So I encourage you all to speak out, right? If you can. Some of you can't afford to, and I recognize that self-preservation is a valid goal, right? It really is, right? If you're gonna preserve somebody else, yourself is also something worth preserving. But if you speak out and have the opportunity to do that and can afford to do that, it's incredibly cleansing, because you don't have to start lying to yourself. You can dump that stuff, and you really do help other people who believe the same thing but didn't have the opportunity to say it. All right, third example, this World Religions Patient Voice series. Now, there's actually, I think, a good spirit behind this. What this is the University of Utah Medical and Dental Schools reaching out to find out what various patient populations think. Okay, so they have an LGBT panel, they have a Native American panel, they have a Hispanic panel, they have this panel, they have that panel, and one of their panels was on world religion. So I get a call and saying, would you come join our panel on world religions to represent the atheist view? And I'm saying to myself, do they know what they're getting into, right? I go, sure, and I kind of give them a good clue. I send them some articles, and, so game on, challenge accepted. I was not polite. I was not respectful, right? And as you can imagine, this panel started out with the usual trope of bringing together all of these people and respecting all views is what makes us stronger. No, it's not what makes us stronger. Ridiculous ideas don't deserve respect. They deserve rejection. And so that's how I started, okay? Within 5 minutes, someone broke out in tears and left the audience. I'm not making that up. Right? And that wasn't 5 minutes of me. I was like number 4 speaking, right? So right away, this was too much to handle, right? So I wrote an op-ed too, right? At the end of this session, the organizer said how disappointed he was. He accused me of being violent. And I my head again exploded, violent. Why did I'm not threatening to kill anybody. I'm not saying we should kill all theists. I just said, your ideas, these are ridiculous. They're repugnant, right? And that's not violence. Sorry, that's not violent, right? And there was one example there that I think really got people perhaps more upset than any. And if we back up, we'll see the world religions consisted of a Baptist, so Pastor Davis, a Muslim, a Jew, and a Mormon, right? World religions, they're all Abrahamic religions except me. So it's four Abrahamic theists against me, right? So, and finally, after hearing about the third time about how we're supposed to respect people's ideas, I said, no, right? I don't respect religious ideas. What about you, Pastor Davis? Do you respect the Mormon preachings, the Mormon scripture that black skin is a curse from God? I don't respect that, and I bet you don't either. Ooh. Trouble ahead, okay? So this led to various attempts to get me fired. Here's an example. I just watched your performance and behavior on today's panel, and it was unacceptable. You're a bigot and a racist. Well, wait a minute. Since when did fighting racism become racist? This is the convolutions that theists go through, right? You're no respecter of persons, races, or religion. No, I do not have to respect your religion. That's not a reason to fire me, Sorry, too bad. I've copied the Office of Equal Opportunity and Affirmative Action, and this is intolerable. Of course, got to go for the double exclamation point, right? Sherry, the director of the OEO, you need to interject on this subject. Greg's behavior today is despicable, egregious, inappropriate, and represents all that is wrong with the world. All right, yeah, the bombing of Sarajevo, the 10 million children that die of disease and hunger every year. That's on me, right? All that's wrong with the world because I don't respect these religious ideas, right? He doesn't represent the University of Utah, and therefore he should not be affiliated with the University of Utah. To its credit, I still have a job. All right. So, science and medicine actually pay a lot of attention to ethics. And one common counter-rejoinder is, yeah, but it says nothing. Science and medicine say nothing about what ought to be. Well, that's nonsense, right? We all know it's nonsense that saying God did it is not a scientific empirical explanation. In very much the same way, saying because God said so is not an ethical explanation. That which explains anything can explain nothing, right? It's just this post hoc rationalization, right? So it's true that science requires a premise, but if you know anything about epistemology, all deductive arguments require a premise, right? And science has put a lot of thought, as have other secular organizations, into what constitutes appropriate ethics. So the United Nations has a Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This is arguably the world's most translated document. That's wonderful, right? There is a guide, a very wonderful guide, on the Guide to Responsible Conduct and Research regarding science. Yes, we do have ethics. And medicine has ethics too, right? So a lot of these arose out of the atrocities of the Nazis and during World War II, that these kinds of things would not be permitted. Here's one that I'll talk about, respect for autonomy, right? The patient has the right to refuse or choose their treatment, right? Here's another one, justice. Concerns the distribution of scarce health resources and the decision of who gets what treatment, fairness and equality. In simple terms, right, everybody should get treatment and should get equal treatment regardless of all sorts of things, including their religious beliefs. And I say that as an atheist, right? It would be wrong for me to deny treatment to a Muslim or a Mormon or a Baptist or a Jew because I have the treatment, but I don't like their religion, right? But going the other way, it's all too common, right? So I spoke about these various conflicts. As already alluded to, religion is quackery, and magical thinking by itself is problematic, but it also has real-world practical consequences. It's harmful, right? Children throughout the United States every year die because their parents believe in faith healing. They believe that intercessory prayer actually works, right? Now, you may dismiss them as extremists and as doing something wrong, but if you're a theist and preaching that intercessory prayer actually works or could work because God is all-powerful and can do whatever he wants, you share in that blame. That blame is on the shoulders of moderates as well as extremists because they're preaching the same thing. One of them has the integrity to actually practice what they preach or practice what moderates preach. So you don't get away by saying, no, right? Because you're preaching the same thing, right? There's a bunch of religious practices that are medically contraindicated, but they're exempted because God says so, right? So, a bunch of Abrahamic theists on the panel there. Some Abrahamic religions preach that God says you cannot put bacon into your mouth, right? Some of those Abrahamic religions also preach that the right thing to do is cut off the foreskin of a baby boy and then put his bloody dick into your mouth. This is true. This is religion. This is your brain on religion. The problem with that, aside from the potentially kind of wacky nature of it, and aside from the mutilation that's being done, is that the rabbi has herpes and he transmits herpes from one baby boy, bleeding baby boy dick, to another bleeding baby boy dick, and they die. And they die because they're young and they can't fight this off. And this is allowed in the United States. It is in common practice in Orthodox sects in New York City. And you can guess what the argument is for why this should be allowed. Religious freedom. It's my religious freedom to kill an infant because God says so. Body autonomy. Okay? You just saw that from the Helsinki Accords. This is a big principle, right? You can't do stuff against people's will. What does religion say? Religion says women don't have reproductive rights. Think about this for a moment. I actually work on subjects. We have to get their permission to do anything. If you work on a corpse, you have to have permission to use their body tissue. Right? Even if you could save 2 people by taking the organs out of a medically dead person and implanting them in people who need those organs and could save them, medicine says no. So when we deprive women of their reproductive rights, we're depriving them of rights that medicine wouldn't deprive even a corpse. And we do that for religious reasons. This was a big one for me that I talked about a fair amount and could have talked about even more, right? Which is inclusion. That people should get equal non-proselytizing treatments regardless of their faith or their lack of faith, right? And that's what medicine says, right? Unfortunately, it's not true. It's not true conceptually. What intercessory prayer says is those who believe in a God, they get God's help, but other people don't. It's not true scripturally. If you know anything about the Bible, all right, the world's best conversion mechanism is to read the Bible. Jesus himself goes, I was sent to help only the lost sheep of Israel. It's not right to take the meat and give it to that Canaanite bitch. That's Jesus. This is the person that they're all going, yeah, you know, he's such a nice guy. No, and I'm tired of even of atheists going, Christians aren't being Christian when they do this kind of bigotry. Actually, they are. They are. They absolutely are, right? But I focused mostly on the practical issues, which is that all too often, people who are prominently or outwardly atheist don't get the respect or the treatment that they deserve. So I collected a couple of examples. Let me share just 2 of them with you. One is the sort of nastiness that results. Shortly after moving here, my child fell off the side of our couch onto my baby fell onto one bit of tiled floor in the living room. We took her to the hospital since she had a huge bump on her head, and she was still an infant. But I was wearing my college pagan club shirt with big pentacles on it. Okay, so it's not even, it's still sort of religion. We got horrible looks the whole time we were there, and the nurses were very short with us. I couldn't figure out why until I remembered what I was wearing. I've never had treatment like that when I was wearing anything else. Okay, so it's an anecdote. These are anecdotes. But they're anecdotes I've heard the type of over and over on the pages of various sites, including Atheists of Utah, now sort of disconnected from this group. But people still talk about how they go in, right? So here's one that moved me. I'm supposed to be seeing a therapist for myself for PTSD and gender identity issues, as well as day-to-day stressors and single parenting a child with mental health issues, dealing with extended family drama and pursuing a career in science. Like, that's not enough, right? It's a lot. I have, however, opted to stop seeing therapists due to multiple experiences, not just one, right? Not an isolated instance, with them bringing religion into the sessions. Right? The last one I stopped seeing after only 2 sessions, as she very quickly brought up how blessed I was and how God seemed to have a plan for me, and on and on and on. Right? For medical professionals, right? To be telling people who are suffering from religious abuse and indoctrination and trying to escape from it, how they should go back to God, is like telling an alcoholic that the solution to their problem is alcohol. It's not only counterproductive, it is ethically wrong. And yet this happens over and over again, particularly in the mental health professions. All right. I'd like to finish up with some real science, right? So as already indicated, religion doesn't do anything for amputees, right? Pray for them. They don't regrow a limb. They're no better off than you were before. Science can't yet regrow a limb, though it's working on ways to do that, which are not crazy, because salamanders can grow limbs. Newts can grow limbs. There's no deep reason that we couldn't turn on the same gene products that would allow a person to grow a limb, but we're a good 10 or 20 years away. But in the meantime, there's lots of stuff we can do. We can develop advanced prostheses that will provide real benefits, unlike prayer. And that's one of the things that my lab and my colleagues are trying to do. So this is one of our subjects, Matthew Beckstead. He suffered a rather horrible electrical accident while he was working on an outdoor sign by Young Advertising Company, by the way. That was too close to a power line. He turned around with a piece of metal conduit, touched the power line, fried his hands. Electricity went through his feet, fried his feet. He fell off the ladder, basically on fire. And it was his good fortune that an EMS guy was just happened to be driving by, saw this flaming body fall out of the sky, stopped and saved his life. But he has no hands, right? So, to understand this, what we're trying to do basically, in simple terms, is this. Is to take a Luke-Skywalker type of motorized, sensorized prosthetic hand that we don't make, made by the DECA Corporation. And our job at the U is to plug that advanced sensorized hand, motorized hand, right into the user's own body, their residual limb, their muscles and their nerves, so that they can move this advanced hand just by thinking about it, number one. Number two, that when their hand touches stuff or when moves through space, they can feel a sense of touch or of movement. And number three, ideally, even begin to feel whole again, to embody this limb as part of their body. All right, so to understand this, before getting into it, I have to do the scientific thing, which I do have a conflict of interest. I do own a patent for manufacturing some of the devices I'll talk about. As Steve Jacobs once told me, prosthesis, he did the Bellagio fountains, worth millions. He did the Jurassic Park dinosaurs, worth millions. And he looks at me and he goes, "Clark, I got to tell you, you can make hundreds and hundreds of dollars in prostheses, right?" So, I'm not doing this for the money. In fact, I've yet to see, Dan, if any of you are familiar with Dan Hicks and the Hot Licks, he had 2 albums, Striking It Rich, and the next one was Where's the Money? I haven't seen a single dollar from my licensing of this, and that's not why I do it. I do it for the benefit of others. All right, so what's this like? Imagine it's you who wake up one day and both your hands are gone, both of them. That's bad, not just one, both of them gone. Right? How do you get through your day? How do you pick up and hold a fork to feed yourself? How do you tie your shoes? Try doing that with 2 residual limbs. How do you pick up and tickle your kid? How do you play the guitar? All right? So that's part of it. And the motor control stuff is pretty obvious, but less obvious is that the sense of touch is important as well. All right, so let's see, right? Let's not make too big of a mess. All right, so imagine this is a plastic solo cup, right? I reach out and grab it. Now, it's true that you can guide a prosthetic hand under visual control, right? That is possible. But there's a lot of problems with that. Number one, what do you got to do? You got to look at the hand. Right? So there you are driving along with your prosthetic hands on the steering wheel and you got to look at your hands instead of the road. This is not good. It's cognitively demanding. Number two, there's a lot of things you do that you can't see. You can't use visual control. So when I reach around the back of this cup, I can't see what my hand is doing. Right? So if it's a plastic cup and I squeeze too hard, I crush it. And if I squeeze it too little, right, I drop it. Right? Moreover, our hands are a real part of how we interact with our world and with other people. And so to lose your hands is in some ways to begin to lose your sense of self. One of our subjects described it as like losing a family member, but every day you wake up and you're reminded of the loss. Okay? And I've seen grown men break down and cry when we give them their hands back. So what we're also trying to do is to restore a sense of feeling whole again by having this tool become part of their body image. And the brain does that surprisingly well. So how do we do this? So now I'm going into the science part, right? To give you a sense of real science. Some of it you may not quite understand in technical detail, but it doesn't matter. I think you can get the basic points. So one of the things we do is for the sense of movement is use these things called Utah slanted electrode arrays. They're over here on the bottom right. And each one of them consists of 100 different electrodes. Okay, and they were invented by my colleague, Dr. Richard Norman. And we can take those devices and implant them right into the residual nerves. Now, maybe this is a surprise. You might not be surprised to think that the brain still works, right? After all, that's not been damaged directly. But even the biological wires that connect your brain to the spinal cord, or more accurately, from your spinal cord out to your muscles and your skin sensors, they still work too. So for movement, we can put those devices in. We also put in what are called EMG electrodes. That stands for electromyographic array. So it captures the electricity generated by muscles. Okay? So we put those in as well, and those are made by our industrial collaborators Ripple, just also here in Salt Lake. And the idea is a person thinks about moving, the signal goes down to their spinal cord and then out their arm nerves, and our job is to capture those signals with these recording devices and then interpret them, which is like a huge part of the problem, and decode them so that when the person thinks about moving the hand, that's exactly what happens. All right? That's it in a nutshell. Going back the other way, for sensation, right, we as engineers can also pass current as well as record electricity. So if we talk to these biological wires, if you will, we talk to what are called axons and activate them, they'll send up a signal to the brain, and the brain doesn't know any different. It feels real, right? If you light a firecracker fuse, it doesn't matter whether you use a match or a butane lighter or another sparkler, right? Once that fuse is sending up a message, then the recipient, in this case the firecracker, in the prosthetic case, the brain doesn't know what started it. It just knows it got the signal. All right? So all we have to do is recreate the same pattern, spatial-temporal profile pattern of activity in the nerves, and the brain will really, not metaphorically, but really interpret this as being the real thing. So have any of you heard of the cochlear prostheses? Okay, so what's the story on those?
Is the one that's magnetized to the person's head and stimulates the hammer. And
yeah. So that's exactly right. You have a microphone out here. It picks up sound. It's wireless, so then it crosses the skin barrier, which is a big deal for all sorts of medical reasons, but not conceptually important here. And then it stimulates the fibers of the auditory nerve. Okay? So this is made really advantageously simple by the fact that the auditory nerve is laid out like a piano keyboard. So on one side of the auditory nerve are the low frequencies, in the middle are the middle frequencies, and then over here are the high frequencies. So if I want to send high frequency sounds to the brain, I turn on these electrodes. If I want to send low frequency, I turn on these electrodes. And if I decompose the auditory signal into the right frequencies and send them to the nerve, the person hears. And not only that, they understand, right? My bank manager has a cochlear prosthesis, and she does her job on the friggin' telephone. No lip reading, no body language, right? And I want you to think about what may seem like a side point, but it's really important. If you gave me all the electrodes in the world, all the technology in the world, and allowed me to put electrodes into auditory cortex to evoke the understanding of speech, I could not do it. Why could I not do it? I just granted myself the magic wand of all the technology I want. We don't know the code. We don't know how the brain does this. We don't understand speech in the brain, right? And when you pick up an object, right, if any of you closed your eyes and picked up this, you'd know it's a coffee cup. You don't have coffee cup receptors on your hand. Sorry. You got pressure sensors and vibrometers, and you got sensors in your muscle to say something about how hard your muscle is contracting. You don't have coffee cup sensors. And so if you wanted to activate the coffee cup sensor in the brain, we'd be clueless how to do it. But we don't have to, right? If I grabbed this cup and they did it with all their digit pads, right, we would activate all their digit pads and they would know the shape of the object or the size of the object. So our job basically, if you are familiar with the cochlear prosthesis, is to do the cutaneous body tactile stuff version of what the cochlear prosthesis actually does. That's it in a nutshell. All right? And the real magic, however, happens when we put them together so the person's involved in a sensory motor experience. Now, it might be self-evident that using sensation to guide where your hand is important, and it is, but there's something else that's important that's less obvious, which is when you move, that actually has incredible filtering processes implemented on what you sense. And the most obvious day-to-day example of this is as follows. You could reach out and stick your finger under his armpit and he would probably, be tickled. But if you do that to yourself, you can't tickle yourself. Right? And that's because you have efference copy and proprioceptive feedback from your muscles saying, oh, this is not a foreign body poking my tender areas. This is not a body threat. This is just me. Right? So we're beginning to capture something about the sense of embodiment of self versus other. And that's what we want to do with the prosthetic hand. So here's the take-home message. We can control 9 different qualitative types of movements with the hand, which is actually more than the present hand actually has. We can get over 100 different sensory percepts that cover the hand and that they can use those in functionally useful ways. And last, and in some ways the most importantly, when we put those two together, that's where the magic happens, right? They begin to actually embody this hand as if it's their own. They can do more complicated sensory motor tasks, but they even begin to feel a sense of it's being them and even reducing what's called phantom pain. So here's one of the awful things about this, right? How do you treat a body part that doesn't exist? Right? Right? If you have a pain in your hand, your doctor could, put some lidocaine on it or, put some topical ointment on it or treat it in some way. But how do you treat an imaginary body part? Right? This is a nervous system problem, not an external one. So we've done this in 6 subjects. I guess what's worthwhile pointing out is that we're making it increasingly complex, and we're going for increasingly longer periods of time. We're now out to a period of almost a year. And they get 2 of these recording devices and stimulating devices in the nerves. These are 2 of the major arm nerves, so we put 1 in each. They go right into the nerve. And then we also put the EMG wires here in the forearm muscles. And that may seem kind of strange. But if you think about it, or you just use your body as an experiment, most of the muscles for your hand are actually not in your hand. They're in your forearm, right? You can feel your muscles moving around when you rotate your wrists or make a fist, right? So we can record those signals even though they're still missing the hand, right? There's some intrinsic hand muscles like your thumb muscle. And you can't do the Spock thing. I can't do that anyway, so, those you need to have the EMG wires for. All right, so what do we do? Well, suppose you're a conventional neuroscientist. The way you might do an experiment is like this. A person moves their fingers. You record from motor cortex or from the nerve, and you see what they're doing, and you see what the neural activity is doing, and you go, okay, that's the neural code for doing that movement. But we have a problem. We can't do that experiment. How come? Because they don't have a hand to show us what they're doing, right? Oops, right? And they can't even show us with the other hand if they're bilateral. So here's what we do instead. We have them watch a hand on a computer screen, like shown here, okay? And then we move the virtual hand on the computer screen, and we ask them to do the same thing, mirror that movement with their imagined phantom hand, which to them is still really there, okay? Even though it's not physically there, it's there in their brain. And if you think that's wacky, you all have a blind spot, and you don't notice you have a blind spot, right? And you're hallucinating it, right? So this is sort of like a body version of a blind spot. It's not really there, but they still experience it, right? So the index finger moves. They see it move. When it moves, then here's one nerve recording from one electrode. It goes, right? And if you look at the firing rate during that imagined movement, the firing rate goes up in concert with the actual movement that we made of the prosthetic hand and presumably imagined movement that the subject made, and that's highly correlated. So we go, yeah, we should use that electrode. Except we have 200 different electrodes to do that for. So this is a color-coded map. Some of these electrodes are activated during this imagined movements. Others of them are not. Here's the electrode that we were talking about. It's a red color. That means it's highly correlated with that imagined movement. And then we take all of this and through circumstances I won't talk about. Whoops, we're freezing here. We lose control. Hold on. Oh, my computer is trying to connect to the interwebs. I do want to exit box. Okay, so then we take all of these different correlations and put them into an algorithm, which I won't describe, but as you kind of can imagine, is a big part of the program. And then we use that to control the hand. But we've moved up since then. We no longer have just 2 electrode arrays in the nerves. We also have this EMG. And to put it all together, we now have some 720 different channels that we have to combine into this algorithm to figure out what the person's thinking about moving. So that's kind of complicated. We can't do it by eye. We need computers. But the computers do pretty well. So here's some examples. I want to give you a sense of the boringness of science, right? You go to I fucking love science and it's all bling and it's all cool. But there's a lot of real sweat that goes into this. So for us to quantify whether he can do it, it's not all fun and games, though there's some fun and games. It's Careful, deliberate quantification. So this is a chore for them as much as it is for us. They have to go through each individual movement and demonstrate they can do it. They have to move, for example, their thumb into our target zone, which is now green because they hit the target. All of the other digits have to remain green, which means none of the other digits moved out of their resting position. And if they did, then they didn't do the one intended movement, right? So they can do thumb, they can do index finger flex, they can do middle finger flex, they can do ring flex. These are just examples. They can do little finger flex, they can do wrist rotations and wrist flexions. And importantly, and not so obviously, but here on the lower right, what you can see is that they can actually create novel movements that we didn't train our algorithm on. This is incredibly important, okay? And it's also quite different from how conventional neuroprostheses work, right? We're basically giving them the vocabulary, the basic elements of movement, and then they combine it together in novel ways that are totally of their choosing, that we didn't specify, that we didn't anticipate, and that we didn't train. So that novel capability provides a lot more capabilities, right? There's 22 degrees of freedom in the hand, 22 different things they could do. So if we could do number 22 with number 21 with number 20 versus and 19, 18, there's like hundreds of different things you can do with your hand. We can't train them all. We don't have to. We just give them the basic vocabulary. They tell their own story. So here's Matthew again. This is the first time that he got to control his hand in one of these non-boring tasks. It was just like, hey, Matthew, have a good time, right? Just control the hand. And the first thing he did, being a musician and being younger than I am, and you too, Cuno, so don't give me any grief, as he said this, and I had like no idea what that was all about. And some of you do. What is that?
It's the Malika, the devil hunter.
Well, it could be too. There's also some rude things it could be, but at least I'm told that's like rock and roll, baby. Okay? So he said, that's like the coolest thing I've done in 16 years. This was a combination we didn't train. I certainly didn't even think about, but it's what he wanted to do. So in this movie, what you'll see is him just kind of moving it around in a fluid way, right? Just trying it out. He moves his fingers, moves his wrist. He can do both of them at once, right? Coordinated, kind of smooth, just checking it out, right? And reminder, he hadn't been able to do this for 16 years. So his hand's coming alive for the first time. So a pretty meaningful moment. What about play the guitar? So he was a musician, loved music, and it became apparent as we started to work with him. This was one of our earlier subjects where we worked with him only for a month. We didn't get it done. So that was pretty disappointing. We didn't know if we should tell him, and at first we didn't, but then we told him later that we were trying to do it for him even though we didn't succeed. He said, that's all right. Thank you for thinking of me. But how would you play the guitar if you didn't have either hand? Either hand, right? So here's how we do it, right? We've got these recording devices in his nerves and his muscles, right? Through the magic of that decode algorithm that I talked about, right? We can interpret what pattern of activity means, for example, that when he wants to flex his middle finger. Okay, now you old coots here, like me, don't quite know about this, but there's this video game that involves a Wii guitar, right? And we would hack into that. And so when middle finger movement on his virtual prosthetic hand would play the middle fret of that Wii guitar. You with me? And then there's a game called Rock Band, and we would have the middle fret of that guitar play the middle note. So if you're not familiar with this game, what happens is there's music playing in the background, and then notes come down this screen here, and you've got to press the right fret at the right time. And if you do, then the note plays loud, and there's a little explosion. And if you miss it, the note goes soft and there's no cool explosion. Okay? So this is his debut performance. It's not like he's been practicing for years with this. This is right out of the box. First time ever. So here he is, playing away. Got it. Missed that one. Got it. Got it. Got it. Got it. Notice he's getting all 5 of them at different times. And we're just going wild, right? Woohoo! And he's getting them, almost all of them, right out of the box. So this is an example of restoring function back to someone, doing the things they want to do, right? Things that are meaningful. Missed one there. Boom. Yeah.
Rock on.
All right. So what about sensory? How do we do that? We activate a fiber that goes up to the brain, right, that activate the nerve fiber, the information is transmitted to the brain, and then the subject presumably then feels their hand. Now, we're trying to be scientists about this. How do we know they feel their hand? It's not so self-evident, right? We don't have an objective metric of that. So they have to tell us. And what they tell us is they mark where it is, its location, its quality, whether it's vibration or tingle or pressure or a sense of movement, your proprioception, right? You can all close your eyes and like put your two fingers together over your head. You know where your body is in space. That's a very important aspect of sensory experience. And the intensity, whether it's strong or weak. So we have to do that one by one for over 190 electrodes, so it takes like forever. But when we do, right, this is what we end up with. A map like this is over 100 different percepts on their hand. As a technical point, not all the electrodes are expected to work. Some of the nerve is made up of connective tissue to keep it together, and you wouldn't expect those would evoke percepts. But we get over 100 of them. And they cover the hand, and they involve cutaneous stuff, which is the circles, like senses of touch, like pressure, and then the arrows indicate senses of movements, right? Close your eyes, and you know your finger is moving. So if I sent the signal up to your brain, activity on that nerve fiber, you would think your finger is moving, even though you don't have a hand, right? So that's a really important aspect of things. Quantitatively, we have both cutaneous and proprioceptive percepts. If there's any aficionados in the audience, there's actually like 20 different cutaneous senses, body senses, and so having the subcategories of those is really quite important for restoring a sensory experience that's realistic. They can use these in useful ways. This is just a grid of the electrodes. So these circles indicate the 4 different electrodes that will turn on from time to time. We activate each one independently. If we activate this one, then he feels vibration on the tip of his ring finger, or tingle on his pinky finger, or tingle at his base, or sting at his wrist, right? Or we can turn them all on together. And so now we do some science. We say, okay, we put the blindfold on. Actually, we don't really need it because you can't tell what we're stimulating, but whatever. And then we ask him to say, which one of those 5 conditions are we stimulating? Right? So this is really important because imagine you have this phantom pain. And imagine you want your hand back. You really do, right? So you're going to be really biased that anything you feel is going to be like us doing it. So we have to rule that out. So how would we rule that out? Well, we ask whether he can identify those 5 different things. And he does that 35 times in a row. Right? Now, science never knows anything with certainty. This isn't an epistemology talk. But we don't know anything with certainty. There's always some chance. Right? But think about the chances. What's the first one? 1 in 5. What's the second one in a row? 1 in 25. What's the third one in a row? 1 chance in 125. What's the fourth one in a row? 1 chance in over 500. What's the fifth one in a row? 1 chance in over 2,500. Like, go out 35 in a row. It just reaches basically, for all intents and purposes, 0. This is real. So, what about putting it together? Those of you who are interested in following up, this article came out in Wired recently. We're actually quite pleased. This is a funding agency called DARPA. They have like a whole bunch of different programs and then lots of people within these programs, and our stuff is profiled as one of the 2 things that they talked about. And what caught their attention was one of our bilateral subjects recently involved in the following experience here. He reached out and he touched a door, a virtual door. So at this point, we're just doing things in virtual reality, but it's a complicated virtual reality made by Majoko. We didn't develop it, though we refined it. And so it has a physics engine in there. So if you reach out and touch a virtual cup, then the virtual hand gets sensors activated and sends back voltages, and we can use those to stimulate the nerves. You with me? So he can actually feel and manipulate objects. Right? So we've done all of this boring, 1 electrode at a time, 192 different electrodes, increase a little bit more. Do you feel it yet? Do you feel it yet? Do you feel it? Like over and over. And it was all good. But this is the first time he gets to actually start using it together in an integrated fashion, the way we all do. So he reaches out and touches the door, and he jerks back. As if it's really just become alive. So let me just show you that. It was really quite a powerful movement for us.
Oh my god, I just felt that door.
Oh my God, I just felt that door.
Oh yeah.
Can you feel the fingers sliding when you do that?
Yeah, actually I can. God, that's so cool.
All right, little anecdote appropriate for this group. You can be a good scientist regardless of your religious background if you put that religious stuff away. So one of my students was very LDS, came from BYU, and he's a great student, really. I got no complaints, except he couldn't deal with the fact that the word God was coming out of the subject's mouth. So he didn't like to show this video. Actually, he tried to show it once and cut out the God part. And I said, no, you can't do that. Like, that's what the subject said. It's not on you. That's what the subject said. You got to report science the way it actually happened, not the way you want to happen. All right, so, VR is great, virtual reality is great, but you really want to do this in the real world. We're going to get a really fancy hand that I'll tell you about in just a moment. We've actually already gotten it, but we didn't want to wait. So Chris Duncan, my colleague, and two grad students, David Kluger and David Page, made this open bionics hand, right? 3D printed. It's a wonderful new technology. They put motors in it. They put sensors in it, right? It's not as fancy as the super duper $100,000 hand. And we did this for under $1,000, but he could use it, okay? And then we put it on his socket, and so he could wear it, okay? And then we connect up the motors and the sensors to the wires that are already in his arm and take it away. And so this is what's called a box and blocks test. It's what's standard used for hand function. It's a pretty simple task. Is can you reach in and pick up blocks and move them to the other side? And it's brain dead. You basically count how many blocks they moved. And it's not a very great test, but this is actually the standard of the field. So what I want you to watch is just he can reach in there and make some nice dexterous movements with this admittedly inexpensive prosthetic hand. So he reaches in, grabs a block, reaches back, picks up another block, reaches in, gets another block, and so forth and so on. So that we were quite pleased by this, as was he. All right, but the name, look, don't blame me. The name of this fancy dancy hand of this program is called Luke-Skywalker for obvious reasons. Okay, we didn't name it, but we'll exploit it just like everybody else. So not long ago, just 2 months ago, we got the Luke hand. Okay, so here's the Luke hand. It has 6 different types of movements. It's got a bunch of sensors. It's really durable. In previous work, it had been taken home. However, that hand had no sensation. That's our job, is to now kick it up a notch. And this is kind of crazy, but how would you control it unless you had implants in your body, right? And one of the big challenges in prosthetics is not just developing a complicated hand, but if you got all these complicated things to do, what are you going to control it with? So believe it or not, I'm not making this up, they control it with their feet, okay? So one foot has tilt sensors on it, and that controls the wrist, okay? And the other foot has tilt sensors on it, and that controls the hand, all right, the digits. So obviously it's pretty hard to walk around and do this, right? Can't drive, right, because you start doing the foot pedal thing, and your hands start flying all around. And it's deeper than that. It's not only is it non-intuitive, but because it's complicated, right, and you have very limited control over it, just these tilt switches, what the person does is not what Matthew did. It's not rock and roll kind of control. Instead, what they do is they pick from a menu. They go through and say, click, 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 click. I want power grip. And then the hand executes power grip. Okay? And then they click back and go, power grip off. I want pinch grip. And then the hand does pinch grip. But they're not controlling it. They're just selecting it. And then the electronics in the hand actually effectuates the movement. That's not how you do it, right? It's not like you go, okay, I picked up this one, and then your hand goes and does its thing until you send it another message. So we want to do differently there. We want to give direct control. So we got this in. Now, this may seem a little weird. Our first test involved the hand on the table. Okay, there are a couple of reasons for that. Number one, if you're an engineer and you're going to make a hand, and like this is the first time ever, right? No one's ever used this in the history of the universe. You're going to make a hand and you don't know who's going to get it. What hand do you make, right or left?
Right.
Right hand. Most people are right-handed. Most people get their right hand damaged. Guess what hand our subject had amputated? Yeah, left, okay. So it wasn't a great match, and then there were some regulatory issues that we had to deal with. So we started on the table, which actually has some advantages. So he could do all of these different movements, but important to us, right, was not just selecting movements that already existed, but novel movements, like this tripod thing. So he could do that. Moreover, there's a real advantage to doing it on the table, right? Does this have any sensors in it? Can I tell if this table is hard? Of course I can, right? And if it were soft, like if I put it in sugar, I could tell it was soft. Right? So having it on the table is better science than actually having it on the body if you want to know if the sensors really work. So we gave him a soft block to squeeze, shown here on the left, or a hard block to squeeze. Of course, he's blindfolded. He can't see what he's squeezing. And the question is, can he tell what's squeezing? So when he squeezes the soft block, the sensors are activated only a little, and we stimulate only with low frequencies. When he squeezes the hard block, the sensors are activated a lot. And so we stimulate with a high frequency. And that's what happens here in this movie, and he could do it almost perfectly. So it goes along, he squeezes the soft block, sensor output is low, stimulation frequency is low, and he says, soft. Blindfolded, we replace the block. He comes along, he squeezes it, he squeezes the hard block, sensor output is high, stimulation frequency is high, and he says, hard. Okay, over and over, he gets it right. Even more fun is attaching it to his body, right? That's what you'd want. You don't want to control a hand on the table. So we've now gotten a left hand, and we have permission to put it on. So human regulatory issues are important. And here's just some things that he did. This is his first day ever. And so he is sitting here plucking grapes off of this bunch of grapes, and he's not crushing them. Okay, so he's plucking them out one by one. Pretty quickly. You know, it would be nice if it were even more dexterous, but doing a pretty good job going back, letting them go, opening his hand, they fall into the bowl. Sometimes he squeezes a little too hard, but the fact that he has sensation allows him to know how hard to squeeze and when to let go. And so when he's done, we then sort of pick up the bowl and look to see what he's accomplished, and sure enough, he's done a pretty good job. There's a bunch of grapes there. Most of them are reasonably intact. Same sort of thing happened the next day. I point this out. He's been coming to us for almost 11 months, right? Only once in the beginning, or maybe twice, way back 11 months ago, did his wife bring in. After his first use of the hand, he wanted to show her, so she comes in as well. And here he is picking up an egg, the proverbial, fragile as an egg. So he reaches down, picks up the egg. We have the sound up high. Notice stimulation is on when his fingers touch the egg. Stimulation turns off. Now, you're a good skeptic, so you know what you're asking, right? Is that a hard-boiled egg? Anybody could do that, right? So my student cracks the egg, puts it in the bowl, and, doing a good job. Yeah. He can hold a pretty strong grip where he is hammering. A lot of these tasks were two-handed tasks, right? Try hammering something with just one hand. So these were tasks. We said, what would you like to do? And he said, well, these are some things I'd like to do. Putting a pillow...
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So if he missed the nail and he hit his thumb, would it hurt?
You will notice that what we did was, what was he holding, right? So, yeah, it probably would turn on stimulation, but we set limits to our stimulation so it doesn't go super high. As a bit of an aside, it turns out that pain fibers, the information that the biological wires that send pain up to your brain, are not the ones that send normal touch. So no matter how hard we stimulate, how high a frequency we use to stimulate a touch fiber, like a pressure fiber, the subject will never feel pain. Okay? It's like you won't, no matter how much light I shine in your ear, you won't see or hear. Okay? It's just a different pathway. So if I went back to that pie diagram, there were about 10 or 20% of the fibers that are pain fibers, and we figured that out in advance, and we don't use those. But pain, it turns out, is an incredibly important percept, because if you don't have it, you die. You do stuff to yourself and you don't know it. You sit on a hot heater, for example, and you burn your butt. You lean with a pencil against your cheek and you put it through your face, and these people have very short lifetimes. But for experimental purposes, we don't do that. Okay. I was surprised about this, but when you think about it, how hard is it to put a pillow in a pillowcase? Like, yeah, the women here are going, yeah, and the guys are all going, I don't know, right? This is something he does, right? And it's really a three-handed task. So imagine doing it with just one hand. So he said, I'd like to put a pillow in the pillowcase. So we brought in a pillow, and here he is, right? You pick it up, you grab it, you got to shake it out. He's using the table as his third hand, right? Reaches in, pulls it out, and like simple daily things, but you can't do them otherwise. And he goes, oh boy, that's so much easier. He's a real estate agent. So he's got to be on his cell phone a lot. So there he is using his cell phone, right? Holding the cell phone with one hand, right? Which is much better than always having to find some place to put it down and texting away. And his wife says, that's a real life task that you have to have and be able to do like that. And you'll notice in the background here, these lines mean that the stimulation of the hand sensors is on because he's grabbing the phone. Okay? So what's relevant here, as I turn on the video, is the task is over. He's demonstrated he can do it, and he's still holding the phone. So we think, uh-oh, my bad. Something about motor control has gone wrong. He can't let go, which is sometimes a problem with our decode. So my student asked that, and what's important is actually his answer. So is it not releasing? Can't you let go? And he goes, no, it's stimming. Then we go, oh, no, we didn't mean that. And he goes, no, it's nice. I'm letting it stim, right? This is the first time he's felt his hand in 13 years. He likes it. He likes it, right? I'll skip this part. We quantify things in various ways because we're trying to do science as well as just gee whiz stuff. But let me come to the subjective experience, which was alluded to in that. So one of these is the reduction of phantom pain. Here's our subject. He says, after we stimulate this, he says, I've got more range than I did before. It doesn't hurt when I move it. That's the nice thing. My hand isn't stuck anymore. It's like having a cramp that you can't release all the time. So if we're not doing an experiment, some of our subjects just sit there rubbing their limb because it's constantly hurting. Constantly. Right? And how do you treat a body part that isn't there? Right? And so David asked him, do you think that stimulation of the muscle affected your phantom pain? And he goes, yeah, I guess it lessened it. I guess I described that as feeling more natural. And I say, that's great. That's one of the hopes. It's not a promise, right? But if we restore sensory and motor function back, then the real prosthetic hand will become your hand. And then the phantom won't have a place anymore. And this guy's a smart guy, so he knows what we like to hear. Oh, just like Luke-Skywalker, then everybody will want. So just some data, right? Here's his phantom pain at the start of any session. Here's his average pain at the end of those sessions. He's only in there for about 2 hours. It's not a huge reduction, only about 20%. But the idea is if he gets this, so he uses it 8 hours a day at home, it will be much more pain relief. So this is a really cool experiment, but it takes some walkthrough. And the basic goal of what we're trying to establish here is whether or not the subject actually embodies the limb, the artificial limb, so it becomes their limb. You with me? So that's a hard task, right? How do you know what they're really feeling? So here's how we do it. And this is based off of an experiment called the rubber hand illusion, which works in intact people too. So here's his real biological limb over here. Of course, it's missing his hand, right? And that's behind a visual barrier, so he can't see that arm anymore. But on this side of the barrier, which he can see, is his prosthetic hand. You with me? All right. So he can see that hand, and then he can either just look at it and nothing happens, it's just this lump lying there on the table, or he can think about moving it and it moves. And he's thinking about moving it, it moves, and he can see it move, right? Or we can touch the hand, and you can do this in intact people, is someone strokes the prosthetic hand, and at the same time that they stroke the prosthetic hand, someone else rubs the real hidden hand. And your brain puts those two things together. It doesn't make sense that I see this and I feel this. They must be one and the same. Well, we don't have a hand that we can do, right? Because he doesn't have a hand. So what do? We stimulate the nerve fibers that used to come. If we're stimulating the pointer finger, right? if we're touching the pointer finger, then we stimulate the fibers that come from the pointer finger. And so his brain is experiencing his real pointer finger being touched and is seeing the prosthetic finger being touched, and the brain cannot compute. It just merges those two things. And that's what you do every day with your body. And there are symptoms, for example, where people suffer brain damage where they can't do that, and they think the arm that's attached to their body is somebody else's. Okay? So this is created in your brain. So here he is doing this. He's moving the hand that's under his control. He's thinking about moving it. We say, how does that feel? He goes, that feels cool. What do you like about it? It's the first time I've seen my hand move in 10 years. He says my hand. He doesn't say a hand. He says my hand. All right? Not this computer hand. Not the one on the video. The first time I've seen my hand. Right? So then David asks him, he goes, it feels like a moving hand. He doesn't say it looks like a moving hand. He says it feels like a moving hand. Right? So, how do we know whether or not he's embodied it? Well, there are subjective comments there, but here's what we do. Okay, the experiment's done, and then we tell him to close his eyes so he can't see the hands anymore. And then you'll notice his intact hand is over here. Okay? So what do we tell him? We tell him, slide your fingers across the table and line up your intact hand with the left index finger of your left hand. Right? So there's two extreme possibilities as well as intermediates. One is he slides his right hand over to where his real left biological arm is. Right? That's where his arm really is, his real biological arm. But what would happen if instead he had embodied the prosthetic hand? He would slide it over to the prosthetic hand, and if that's what he thinks his real hand is, he'll stop. Does that make sense? And although not that extreme, that's exactly what he does. So here's some more data. Here's the experimental conditions where he sees it or feels it, and it slides over more than when he just looks at it. So now, what happens when he opens his eyes and sees where his hand is, his intact biological hand? He goes, well, that's really strange. I mean, what's strange? I can't feel my biological hand anymore on the other side of the screen. My hand has moved over to here. Right? He wakes up and he opens his eyes, and that's what he sees, that he's put his hands together where they don't belong. Right? I don't know if I like you guys controlling me. We're messing with your head. You got me all mixed up. Do you like that? Do you like that? Feels great. So we're done with the experiment. And the important thing is, what is it that your subjects want? So one of my students, to her credit, asked, is there anything that you want to grasp? So what might you want to grasp after 13 years of not having your hand? He says, yeah, I want to clasp my hands together. And that's what he does.
Is there anything you want to grasp that you see?
I want to clasp my hands together. I say, go ahead, yeah, you can do that. So he reaches out and he just starts feeling his hands touching for the first time. So that's nice, be able to feel your hand again. But if there's anything that's maybe even more important than being able to feel your own hands together, it's being able to feel the grasp of someone you love. So his wife comes in, as I described, and at the end of the session, he holds hands with his wife for the first time. 13 years with his missing hand. He says, if I squeeze too hard, it's not my fault. And they reach out, grab their hands together. She says, yeah. So, that's our goal, sensory motor integration. It's not only about improved dexterity, though dexterity is important. It's not only about feeling, although feeling is important. It's also about feeling whole again, the sense of embodiment. Or as our subject said, God, that's so cool. So our future directions are to take this hand and have them bring it home, which they won't be able to do for about 2 years. To have wireless electronics, a huge technical challenge, but you don't like to have wires outside the body for all sorts of reasons, including infection and breakage. And then ultimately, then they could have this in long-term use, not just an hour or two in the lab, but for hours every day. And that would lead to better embodiment so that it's not only an advanced prosthesis, but even a sense of their own hand. Obviously, this is work of lots of different people. I'm standing up as a spokesperson, many colleagues at the University of Utah, as well as industrial colleagues, as well as people making the arm, funding agencies, largely DARPA, but also the National Science Foundation. But the biggest thanks of all belong to our subjects who volunteer for this work, literally get stuff put in their bodies, literally get stuff yanked out of their bodies. They're never going to get to take it home. They're not the ones. They're not doing it for themselves. They're doing it for other people. And that is what real ethics is all about. So thank you for your attention. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Is it question time?
Yes, it is.
Okay. I did find a clip of one of the spots on the video online. Where can I find more?
They're not published, and so we typically don't put them online if they're published, because then you run into all sorts of challenges, because then the journals say, oh, this is already out there in the public domain. We don't want to publish what's already existing. So we regrettably do not have them readily available.
But there was the one there, the one where he was
That's right.
here moving the one on the screen.
That's right. That is
That's
there.
the only one?
That's the only one that's out there.
Oh.
How do you power this thing?
Presently with a battery, but battery technology is not great, so that is a consideration. These motors are demanding. The battery will run for several hours. And again, that's not something that we're charged with. Our job is to plug the arm into the body, and someone else is making the arm and making the battery. Similar problem, which I didn't discuss at all, is you may have noticed there's a huge rack of computer stuff. So great, we got all this computer. You can walk around with a huge computer rack. No, right? You got to have a portable computer that has to be battery powered as well. So on one hip, they're going to have one battery, and another hip, they might have the battery and a portable processor. And ideally, we'd like to get these small down to like cell phone size. Presently, they're somewhat bigger. Yes. Go ahead.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have a book out there, or are you looking to put a book out there with combinations of your op-eds and the replies and that type of thing?
I haven't thought of that. No.
Would you think of that? I would like that.
Thank you for the suggestion.
Yes. Okay.
I'd be glad to sign a copy for you.
Okay.
But you got to buy it,
Oh, yeah.
I got to make my 7 cents.
Yeah.
I don't know how many people out there are missing, arms or hands or whatever. But is this technology something that's affordable for people that need a limb?
No. But we want it to be. Mm-hmm. So the analogy is this. You all got the internet? You know what it used to be called? DARPANet. My lab had a computer which was about that big, and this is how old I am. A computer that was about as big as this table, cost $100,000 in like 1970s dollars. It was not affordable. You couldn't do squat. So the first foray into technology is always extraordinarily expensive and not useful. One of the big challenges, though, which to its credit, DARPA and other agencies are paying a lot of attention to, is working with healthcare professionals so that when these models become available some years from now, not that many years from now, under 10 years from now, there'll be a way to build them, okay? Because in our healthcare system as it exists now, if you can't bill to this insurance company, then, this issue that we talked about, equity, everybody being able to get it, the only people who could get it are people who have, tens of thousands of dollars lying around, right? And that's not fair because, who usually gets hurt, right? It's not university professors. It's not Wall Street businessmen. It's people who are doing manual labor. They're garbage collectors or, laborers on signs or people who work in junkyards or people who work on assemblies. Those are the people who are more likely to get hurt. Anybody can get hurt in a car accident. One of our subjects, that happened to her. But by and large, these are not people with large amounts of disposable income, and then they lost many cases, they lost their job, because if you used to be a physical laborer and you don't have any hands anymore, you're on disability. So it is a huge issue, and we do worry about that, and we're taking steps to kind of just make this conceptually possible as the first step towards making it physically possible. And as I indicated in that relatively inexpensive hand that we used, it's not really that suitable for home use. It's not strong enough, it's not robust enough, but it's not half bad, and that costs 2 orders of magnitude less than the fancy hand, right? So as technology develops, right, you'll see the high end come down, you'll see the low end get better, and the costs and the function will, we hope, become manageable.
When you're making these motor and sensory maps, are they different for every individual, or are there some consistency?
They're highly similar, but not at the level of resolution that we look at. So you look around this table, right? We all have 2 eyes, we all have 2 ears, all right, not all of us have hair. Have some hair, 2 legs, and our heart's on the left side and not on the right side for almost everybody. We got 2 lungs. That kind of, at that level, they're the same. So the median nerve, which is one nerve we poke, is going to be this side of the hand. The ulnar nerve is on this side of the hand. But would we know exactly which electrode evokes which percept? No. We got to do that. So a huge technical challenge that I didn't address at all is how long do these things last? And the answer is somewhat variable. But for our motor signals, they're stable enough that once we train up the system, you can come back a week or 2 weeks later and things are stable enough that you can use the same algorithm. It's not that they have to spend another half hour getting up every morning and training the limb. So that's really important. Our sensory signals are not quite as stable, but now that we're out for a long period of time, it seems as if they've settled down. So about half of them we can use for a long period of time, but there's a shorter half-life. So it's probably the case that once a week they'd have to get up on the weekend and kind of retrain it up again. Or suffer some loss in performance if they're in a rush. If they went out 2 weeks, it would be worse. But great question.
I have a weird question. How soon till the $6 million man technology?
Yeah, so the take-home trials begin in less than 2 years. So we're under, we being the larger program, this is a kind of science that is results-driven. Results matter. We're not here just to explore the mysteries of the universe. I actually think exploring the mysteries of the universe is a really important part of science. Really, I do. But our job in this particular project is to make this happen so people can use it. And we're part of a huge team, right? I mean, we can't test the fancy prosthetic hand from DECA unless they give it to us. So they're under time pressure to get it to us, right? And so forth and so on, right? Everybody's kind of has to meet their deadlines so that other people can play together. It's like building a house. You can't have the carpet people come in if the floor isn't down yet. So there's a huge organizational effort costing tens of millions of dollars across multiple institutions throughout the world to make this happen. Our job is a small part of it, and that's the part I talk about, which is plugging the thing in and making it so they can move it and they can feel it. Question?
Weird question. Another weird question. How do you guys control pathogens with the implants?
It's a potential problem. One of the advantages in going to the periphery is that it's a simple decode and encode. The other advantage is that then in the worst case scenario, to me it seems like a big deal, but to your average hand surgeon, going in and pulling it out and flushing it out is like stuff that they do similar to what they do several times a week. And so I'll tell you a little story. When I first started doing this, one of the poignant things that happens is that people call you up, right? So I worked in the central nervous system for years and years and years. And then I started doing this, and people call me up and they go, it's not for me, but my husband or my child, they have this. Could you do something for them? And I'd go, we're not quite ready yet. We haven't safety tested it. It's not quite up to speed. We don't want to put it in and do any damage. I didn't tell you all the stuff we did to, make sure it was safe. But first, do no harm, right? And they would say to me, go ahead and put it in, if it's themselves. I'm not using that nerve anyway, right?
Oh, yeah.
And in fact, surgeons often cut the nerve back in an attempt to get rid of this phantom pain. I can guarantee you that in the decades I was working on the brain, no one ever called me up and said, go ahead and put it in my brain. It's okay if something goes wrong. Just take it out. I'm not using my brain anyway. So, I oversimplify because now that we're up here, which is where we get the arrays, they do use those nerves to control their forearm muscles, and that would be a loss. But it's still better than like losing your brain. So these people have already been through extensive physical trauma. And there's a young woman who was the second one to receive a different kind of surgery, but I won't go into great detail, but her remark is very telling, is that, tell Doc he can do whatever he wants with my arm, but he ain't messing with my brain, right? Because that's you in there, and they don't want to lose that. The arm is real important, but the sense of self is even more important. So infection's a risk. But it's particularly a risk when the wires stick through the skin, right? So if you know anything about medical implant, I don't get it. We can put people on the moon, right? Not a big deal. All right, yeah, it's a big deal, but I mean, we can land rocket ships on comets flying through space, and actually having something poke through skin, we can't keep that from developing infections, right? With catheters, with like anything. So we have a major push, not on us, but on our collaborative industrial partner, Ripple, to develop wireless electronics. And it's my proposal, but just in common practice in the field, that once you make it so that there's no skin breakage, the risk of infection goes way, way, way down. So you may or may not know there's tens of thousands of people, maybe 50,000, maybe 100,000 now, Americans with cochlear prostheses, right? And their wires don't stick out. They wear a little magnet, as you've indicated, that lines them up, and the microphone then wirelessly, it picks up the sound wirelessly, translates that into stimulation of the stuff, but nothing has to go through the skin except the electromagnetic force, and that doesn't cause infection. So it's pretty safe, right? Nothing's completely safe. And deep brain stimulation, about a 1% infection rate, but then you do have leads coming out through the skull. So there's some risk. It's a bit of an aside, but one of the standard metrics of how important a particular feature is to somebody is this. How many years of your life would you give up if you could do X? I go, what a morbid measure! Like, can you come up with something better than? But that's standard, right? And there are some trade-offs, but the risk is relatively low. In worst case scenario, their basic body would almost certainly be okay. Peripheral infections tend to be confined. Stuff in the central nervous system in your brain you don't want happening.
Getting back to the first part of your presentation, there was a time in my life when I thought theists didn't wear shoes and sign their name with an X. So I get frustrated when I see people who are graduated from the sciences, especially, talking about their faith, which implies they believe in a mythical God. And so I think, well, I got a 12th grade education. I can see the absurdity of it. How come they can't?
The answer is people are complex, people compartmentalize, people are a mess of contradictions. And it doesn't take a lot of deep, I totally get it, I totally agree with you. It's sometimes people say, well, it's easy for you, got a PhD. I go, no, that's not it. You don't need a lot of training to understand that trees didn't come on Earth before the stars did, right? I mean, it's pretty basic stuff, right? Fifth graders know that zombies coming up out of the Earth are appearing unto many. That's fiction, right? And so when I talked about that last part about religion being deeply dishonest, what it takes to be an atheist is just having the integrity to actually accept the obvious and stop lying to yourself. And Ali Hershey, said that, I'd had enough of lying. The only position that left me without a feeling of cognitive dissonance was atheism. And that's true, but some people just don't want to face that reality. There's a lot of social pressures. And for me, a lot of it goes back to what some people think is child abuse, is that people are indoctrinated when they're so young that they don't have a chance to think about it. And then they grow up and they just accept it as is because they really don't analyze it, because it's really hard to go back all that many layers. I actually thought, and we're all guilty of this, I actually thought Mother Teresa was a pretty good person. I mean, I didn't buy the religious stuff, but I thought she was doing all this wonderful stuff for the poor and the sick, right? Because I never thought about it. I just bought the PR, right? That was the PR when I was growing up. I heard it, I accepted it. What did I know, right? And then you start reading about it, and it becomes untrue. And that's a really hard thing to do, is go back and examine the basic assumptions that you just grew up accepting because we're imprinted to do that, right? When you're 6 months old, it makes, this is Daniel Dennett's argument, it makes a lot of sense that you trust the authority figure because you are too dumb as a species, or young, or too dumb to figure stuff out for themselves, right? So mom and dad keep you safe, and then they tell you this stuff and you believe it. And so we got to be really careful with our children, right? I think it's okay to have fantasy lives. I really do, right? It's wonderful to have imagination, but we have to help them separate fact from fantasy, because as kids, right, those two things are almost indistinguishable. And if we actually perpetuate and reinforce them for believing in fantasy, it has huge consequences, right? But as I said, even theists can be good scientists. And what do? They just stop doing that magic stuff while they're doing their science, which is why we know that even they know it doesn't work, right? No scientist I know goes in and says, okay, I'm going to pray to find out what protein is expressed during this disease, right? It doesn't work, right? And the argument is that people in the National Academy of Sciences, one reason that they're atheists is, it's hard to know causality, right? It's probably bidirectional and interactive and synergistic, is that when you spend your professional life forcing yourself to examine the evidence, it becomes increasingly harder to not do that in all facets of your life. But basically all it takes is intellectual integrity.
Well, I've come to the conclusion that what it's all about, I think of them as theist junkies, escaping the reality of death. And the reason they buy into this mythical nonsense is the fact that they're never going to die. They're just going to float off to heaven and be in the arms of their heavenly Father.
I think fear of death is part of it, but I would disagree, not on the basis of evidence, but just intuition, that it's not only about death. It's just, you grow up with it, you accept it, and you don't really think about it. It becomes very uncomfortable to think about it because you have this sunk cost fallacy, right? You spent 20 years of your life believing this, living this, your family structure is built around it, your social structure is built around it. To become excommunicated from it is a huge loss, so you just go, I don't know, it doesn't, maybe it's not quite right, but good enough. And death is part of it, especially towards the end. But I think all the rest of it, this immersion of your whole being, is part of it, and part of even yourself. And it's, as Sagan said, it's really, really hard to convince somebody that their life has been a mistake. That's basically what it is.
The final product, we've got full body. Do you foresee, some sort of covering over to make the book as possible to human hand?
Yeah, cosmesis is important, and that certainly could happen. And there are interesting demographics there. So women especially would prefer it to be a good cosmetic coverage. These are stereotypes, but demographically have some truth. People in other cultures who see body disfigurement as a big problem, it's a shame. For them, it's really important. And one of the unfortunate aspects of prostheses today is that insurance companies will pay, whatever it is, to give these people antidepressants because they feel socially ashamed. They don't like going out. They feel disfigured. They're reserved. They're shy. They're embarrassed, and that has huge consequences, right? So they'll pay for these medications, but they won't pay for a good prosthetic-looking cosmesis because there's no billing code for that, which is really a shame. Right? Ironically, there is a subset of people, and young military guys being one of the demographics that kind of likes the Darth Vader look, right? They actually want the carbon or the silver look, like, man, isn't this cool? Look at my hand, right? Typically, it takes several years for people to come to terms with it. So some of our subjects, got really bitter. They lost their family. They lost their job. I'm going to speculate they almost lost their lives. And they looked over the abyss and they said, I take one more step, I'm not coming back. And it takes a huge amount of courage and integrity and willpower to switch from going, why me, to what next? And it typically takes them several years to undergo that transition, that their new reality is this. That's true for spinal cord injured people too. But once they get that, I'm not saying that they don't have challenges, but they do better than they would otherwise. And so now, many of our prosthesis users you saw Matthew there, right? I'm not revealing his name, he was in the newspaper. It's like, up front and center, look at my prostheses. This is me. I'm not ashamed to hide it. I want people to know, because I want other people out there who have the same challenges to know that you can come out okay. And that takes a good couple of years. And so some of our people, when they're, you get them in group photographs, they kind of go like this. And that's just in my small sample, the ones that have had amputations for more years, they're like this.
So you said if he would have missed the nail and hit his thumb instead, he wouldn't have felt pain. Are they going to get there to where they'll actually sense pain?
We could do that now, all right? So of the 200 electrodes, roughly 200 electrodes, 192 electrodes, some percent of them are close to the pain fibers. So when we pass current, the fibers that are activated are the pain fibers. We could take that sensor output and send it to that electrode, and they would feel pain. We choose not to do that. We don't want to hurt our subjects, but if you were to argue that there would be protective advantages to it, we could do that. The reason that there might not be is this is an artificial hand, right? So if they burn it,
well, then that's why I asked, because then if they're not sensing something that we would call pain, maybe they're going to cause damage to the prosthesis.
That's right. They could, and they do. So. No, I mean the number one issue for prosthesis users is actually not dexterity, it's not sensation, it's reliability. So Matthew came with me to Washington. He got out of the hospital at 6 a.m. Take him to Washington. He was like, how could I leave this guy going to Washington without going with him? So he's got like two hands. It's really hard to carry suitcases without hands, right? So he put on his prosthetic hands, which he never does hardly. He uses just his residual limbs. He can touch type with his residual limbs. So I don't want to hear y'all whining about fat fingers when this guy is touch typing with his stubs, right? Remarkable guy, right? So he's got his prosthetic hands, and we get to Washington, and one of his hands breaks. There he is 3,000 miles from home with a broken hand and nobody to fix it. So it's a big deal, right? Imagine your hand just suddenly stopped working. So there are fancier hands out there than the one we use. And so it's this trade-off, because the more fancy you make something, the more complicated you make it, the more things you have that can break.
Yeah.
So right now we're kind of trying to hit that sweet spot. If we could make it even fancier, but if you do, then there's more that will break. Let's go for, I wouldn't call it low-hanging fruit. It's still incredibly complicated. But let's go for some trade-offs between reliability and advanced function. Questions?
What's the biggest stumbling block to bringing down cost? Is it just economics of scale?
That's part of it. Yeah. And then Moore's law is still holding, but they say it is. But or maybe it's beginning to fail. But a lot of this technology is technology that isn't being developed exclusively for this purpose. So computers, processors, VLSI chips, batteries, all of this stuff is stuff we're plugging into. 3D printing, right, is not being developed only for this. So being able to take advantage of those wireless technologies, all these things are coming on board. And one of the reasons this project was delayed for so long is that if it had been 20 years ago, the field wasn't ready, right? And you can't do it all by yourself. So I do think costs will come down. quite a lot, and some of it will be economies of scale, because these are all one-off hands, but I don't think that will be the only determinative factor, because when you come right down to it, the number of people with missing hands is modest, right? Diabetes is a big deal for amputation, but that tends to be more lower limb, so there's a parallel project going on for lower limb stuff. We focused on hands because we actually do pretty well with the sea leg. Like on skirt for trias, we actually did well in the Olympics running on a sea leg. It's not as good, but the real advantage comes with your hands, and so that's where we focused. And there's a bunch of people out there. It's not like a truly orphan market, but it's not a huge market. And we're doing it for the benefit of humanity, not, as Steve Jacobson will make hundreds and hundreds of dollars in prosthesis.
Right. Well, I mean, what stems that is because the cost is so high that getting into, let's say, a war veteran who doesn't have a lot of money that would be to me tantamount to developing this and making it cheaper.
Yeah. So these are becoming commercially available. Mm-hmm. Getting insurance to buy into it is a big deal. Mm-hmm. You think of the cochlear prosthesis, I think the cost of a surgery is something on the order of $50,000. Mm-hmm. But the estimate is that for every dollar spent in giving somebody this device, you save the system as a whole $2. Mm-hmm. Okay? That's not the argument of why I do it.
Right.
But if someone wants to do it and says it's too expensive for the system, and you go, actually, you'll save money if you do this, because people won't be on disability, they won't have depression, they'll be out integrated in the community, there'll be all of these benefits that come back, and it will actually save money, then they go, oh, well, in that case, let's go ahead. So those intangibles are very tangible when it comes to the true cost of healthcare, right? And that's true for a lot of the system, and that's one reason why we need politics here, an integrated healthcare system. Because look, if most people move somewhere every 5 years, right? So if an insurance company goes, you're with me now with this job or whatever, yes, I'll get back my costs in 10 years, but you're likely to be gone 5 years from now. It's not an investment I want to make, right? Whereas if the coverage is larger, if we have a national healthcare system, then it might take 5 years to recoup that cost, or even 8. And then after that, it's actually saving our society money. Then it becomes easier to justify, because it's not me who spends these tens of thousands of dollars to buy the arm, and then you switch to some other healthcare provider who gets the benefits.
Right.
Thank you all so much.
Yeah, good job. Thank you all very much for coming out.